I'm honored to have with me today on our podcast Monsieur le Consul, the Consul General of France in Boston, Arnaud Mentré. His bio is very, very impressive. Prior to his assignment in Boston, Arnaud Mentré was Deputy Assistant Secretary for North America in the Bureau of the Americas at the French Ministry for Education and Foreign Affairs, 2015 to 2018, responsible for bilateral relationships with the US and Canada. Arnaud Mentré joined the French Ministry of Foreign Affairs in 2006 in the Bureau of Strategic Affairs, International Security and Disarmament. From 2009 to 2011, he served as counselor at the French Embassy in Moscow and then became advisor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs for Russian, Eastern European, and defense and security issues from 2011 to 2012. From 2012 to 2015, Arnaud Mentré served as senior counselor and spokesman at the French Embassy in New Delhi. Arnaud Mentré is an alumnus of the École Normale Supérieure and the École Nationale d'Administration. He holds an MA in civil law from the University of Paris II and graduated from Sciences Po. He teaches global affairs at the Paris School of International Affairs, Sciences Po. Monsieur Consul, thank you again for honoring us with your presence today. We're very appreciative of your taking the time to speak with us. I've read about so many of your activities here in the US since you assumed your current role in 2018. Please describe your experiences and your impressions of Americans and of the long-standing friendship between the people of our two nations.
Well, thank you very much, Kathleen, for having me on your podcast. And as a general comment, I'd like to say that we deeply appreciate the work of the French teachers throughout the US. And I think there's been a good partnership between the embassy, the consulates, and the French teachers to promote French culture and Francophone culture throughout the US. So it's a great pleasure to be with you today. What strikes me here in Boston, but more generally in the US, is the level of it has something to do with the shared history we have and with this common culture we have. It's particularly striking here in New England with all those places where French history and American history connect. But more generally speaking, I think it goes for the entire US. My colleague in Chicago was telling me about some remote places with French names and very strong links with French history. So it's very strong, and I think it's a reason for optimism for the future of transatlantic relationships. This very strong ties we have. Just one example of that, when Notre Dame Cathedral was on fire. People in Boston would come to us in tears. They were profoundly moved by what's happening in France, and I think this is really has something to do with this level of proximity. And so, that every year we organize an event called the Night of Ideas throughout the world. And this year, the theme will be about proximity. And so I think that we can have some interesting stories of these transatlantic relationships, Franco-American relationships, that we can discuss on that occasion.
Thank you. Please tell us a little bit about how you first became interested in other cultures and languages and a career in diplomacy.
Well, as a student in Europe, it's easier to connect with foreign cultures, different cultures. And so I think it may be a bit more challenging for US students, but when you're in Europe, it's so easy that you come in contact very quickly with German culture, Italian culture, British culture. It's very easy. And so it was the beginning of this general interest in European cultures in general. And gradually, I was interested in different cultures worldwide, with this idea that it's always better to study how things are getting done in other countries as well. It's always very informative, and you can draw lessons from that. The same goes for the US, by the way. It's important to see, how situations evolve in other areas of the world, and to draw conclusions. It's very rich. So I guess this belief led me to become a civil servant and to work in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
Thank you. Um, as you know, between 10 and 20 million people in the U.S. are of French ancestry, and over 2 million speak French in the home. What advice would you have for French language communities, advocates, French language stakeholders who are working to support and to promote the role and presence of French language and Francophone culture in the United States?
Well, I think it's first it's important to connect with other Francophone institutions, because there's a whole network out there, and very interesting synergies can be found to promote projects and explain the importance of French culture and all what the students can derive from knowing about another culture, such as the French. So this network, it's the French teachers, obviously, but also the French cultural centers, the Alliance Française. We have a very large network of Alliance Française throughout the US, but also our economic institutions, French-American chambers of commerce, the French trade advisor. So if you connect all those, you can really build some very effective programs that American students understand that it's an asset for them to speak French. It's about intellectual curiosity, but it's also about professional opportunities. I can just cite one example. It's a bilingual program that we opened in Massachusetts, in Holliston. And for that program, so the students study French and English from a very young age. It's really a bilingual program, but the specificity of it is that one leading French company, such as Dassault System, it's the global leader in terms of 3D modernization, and their headquarters, US headquarters, are here in Boston. Anyway, they were interested in this program, and so they decided to invest in it and to develop a specific engineering course, all in French, for the students. It's a great opportunity for them to learn engineering in another language. And it also shows them that with this asset, they get a specific connection to French companies, and there are major French companies here in New England, but also in other parts of the US. Here in New England, if you take Sanofi, Ipsen, Dassault System, those are among the largest players in the Boston area.
That really sounds like a very interesting, very worthwhile program. It must be wonderful for the children and for the families. While French language and Francophone culture are present throughout the US, the New England states, as you said, are among those with the highest percentage of the population of French-speaking heritage. How do you envision the present and future of the French language and Francophone culture in New England?
Well, the situation is quite good. I was talking to some university professors at Dartmouth College, for instance, but also at Harvard, and they told me that the number of students that learn French is increasing. 10 years ago, it was decreasing. Now the situation is relatively better. And so I think this is a good reason to be optimistic. If we continue good work, and um, I think we can really produce some results. With all the actors of the Boston area interested in Francophone, in promoting Francophone culture, we developed some bilingual programs in US public schools. The first program back in 1987 was in Milton, and it proved to be extremely successful. There's a waiting list, a very important waiting list for the students enrolled in this specific program. But we also open other programs in Holliston, the one I referred to earlier, and in Brockton. We are working to open new programs in Manchester, New Hampshire, um, and also in Maine, in the cities of Princeton and Winston, obviously with a very strong Franco-Canadian tradition. Anyways, there can be some practical programs developed there. There's an interest. The parents are interested. They're interested because they understand that a bilingual education is good for them. It develops curiosity. All scientific studies show that. So we have a good background there to generate interest in Francophone culture. So obviously, this region has this specificity with this very strong Franco-Canadian past. I think it's an asset. Unfortunately, many families lost their knowledge of French, but the next generation is more interested now in rediscovering these roots. So I think this is positive. And there are also some new Francophone immigrants, um, such as, I don't know, the Haitian community in Everett, Massachusetts. They are interested in learning French, keeping the use of the French language, and working on that. Or in Maine, the new Alliance Française that was created in Portland, Maine, has some very fruitful dialogue with um, um, new immigrants coming from Western Africa. So I think this is also an important aspect. And finally, what I said about the economic actors is key. The French economic presence has grown over the years. Now we estimate that there are 200,000 French people living in the US, 20,000 living in the Boston area itself. So it's a massive presence, and you can hear people speaking French uh, in the streets of Cambridge and Arlington and Belmont. So it's a very tangible phenomenon, and this growing presence of French families, expatriates, French expatriates, has a strong impact because you have more people interested in promoting French language, French events, and also it gives the signal that if you're a US student, you have studied French in some way, even if you don't master it, it still makes a difference for all those French economic actors that are now extremely active here in the US.
Well, that is all really great to hear. Wonderful news. Um, you know, as a parent, I'm always interested in bilingualism in the home and in the use of additional languages in the home and in the family. Would you have any advice for parents in the home on increasing the use of French in their homes and also in their local communities?
Well, I think we all agree that bilingual is really an asset for children. Why do I say that? Including the admission officers from the, the leading universities here in the Boston area. I was talking to them, and they say, yes, we know that knowing a foreign language, another language, is important. And they they refer to French in particular because they know that if a student speaks French, unless he or she comes from a French family, it means that this student chose to learn French and make that specific effort, which is not always the case for other languages such as Spanish. So that's why those admission officers told me that they pay attention to the fact that a student speaks French. So it's important to maintain that at home. And now it's quite easy, because you have all those new digital means to have access to French culture. You don't have to go to the French library, though French libraries are very important, but you can have access to French movies, to it's very easy on the internet. And so I think that would be my advice for parents. It's also important to equate French culture with entertainment for the children. I think it will make them keep this strong connection with French. And then in terms of schools, we have all those bilingual programs now that are opening, but also the network of our French agency for education abroad, which is very alive. There are specific programs for children of French families that want to, or their parents want them to continue to study in English, in French over the weekend. So it's called the FLAM programs, and that works extremely well. And now you also have some new options. There's a French company here in Boston, founded by French professors who decided that they would provide with another opportunity, and the parents can enroll in that program, and that program will give additional courses that correspond to the French program, French education in France. And it will be additional to the education they get from US schools. So you can be a French family living in Boston, your children go to American school, and at the same time you get some classes from the French educational program at home. So I think this is very interesting to see how it gradually develops. And I think it's now much easier for a French family to keep its identity and to open those new avenues for their children.
Yeah, that is really all very interesting, really eye-opening. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm just thinking, do you have any additional thoughts or insights that you'd like to share with us?
Well, just to thank you again, and to say to all your viewers that your French consulates are very open for discussion. It's always been a pleasure to interact with French professors throughout the US, and in particular here in the Boston area, New England in general. So don't hesitate. We have officers in charge of French education, and you know them because normally they are extremely well integrated in your networks. But you can always write an email to them and start some projects with us. We would be very happy to help you in this great mission to promote French culture.
Thank you so much. Merci infiniment, Monsieur Consul. Thank you so much for having taken the time today to talk with us. And honestly, please accept my best wishes to you for all the good work that you're doing and for continued success. Thank you again.
Merci beaucoup et à bientôt, j'espère.